show. And tonight we have with us Willow. And Willow, I'm just going to ask you to jump right in and introduce yourself.
Hi there, my name is Willow. I use they, she pronouns. I am a Maine transplant from Florida, and I am in training to be a Soferet and a Shochet.
Awesome. And since this is a Maine focused podcast, I have to ask, what made you want to move to Maine?
The political conditions in Florida as a queer person and also as a Jewish person who wants to be engaged with vibrant and radical grassroots communities, Florida was no longer a viable option. So for climate and for political reasons, I now live in Maine. And I love it here.
Oh, good. I was going to say, have you found the grassroots stuff? Have you found what you're looking for in Maine to in varying degrees? Have you found what you're looking for?
I think people in Maine, both Jewish and non-Jewish, are more excited to get their hands dirty doing handicrafts. There's a huge spinning and wool processing community here. Lots of people have their own small family farms. Lots of people process their own milk. And a lot of people care very much about the environment and about keeping things local, which is a huge aspect of environmentalism that I'm really excited about living here.
Awesome. I guess that kind of partially answers the next question, what your motivation is in learning both how to be a scribe and how to do our slaughter. What was is it that kind of back like an almost like the old school back to the land type thing, or it might be even a multiple choice answer. I
It's
suppose.
definitely a multiple choice answer. The craft of being a scribe and the craft of being a showhead are both really special to me in their own ways. Um, I was raised Quaker, and so doing things with your hands and that kind of like worship with your hands in terms of using what you have and using what you have to make your life holy is very appealing to me. And so the idea of making my own kedusha, specifically my own tefillin, was something I was very attracted to from the beginning of my journey. And um, that naturally led me to more community around like not just the art of scribing Kedusha, but parchment processing and making tefillin and making ink and being a scribe, not just in the way that we see scribes act now, where they have a very specific specialty, where they might just check tefillin, where they might just do Torah repair. Um, I was very drawn to being a scribe in the way where you serve your community and you do everything you can and you have at least a low level mastery over most of the arts. Um, and you recognize the imperfections of everything. And that was a long journey for me. And in terms of environmentalism, I just think it's such a shame how much abundance that there is that is wasted and that we really could use in terms of our Kedusha. And as far as Shechita goes, food has always been very important to me, and there's a lot to say about the Shechita and the kosher meat industry. But needless to say, without getting into any specifics, that it is not functioning as Chazal intended, and it's not functioning in a way that gives it's not even about environmentalism, like from a religious standpoint. There's just not a lot of dignity given to the animal or the shochet or the craft. And um, all of this, all of this is damaging to our people. And also it makes people not want to keep kosher. I think people are more likely to keep kosher if they know the shochet, if they know the chicken, if they know the farmer. And kashrut is not just about a label on a package. It's about intercommunity and interconnectedness. And I don't I don't think we're going to get the Jews of Maine to stop eating meat. We used to have a very vibrant poultry industry here, and when the poultry disappeared, so did the Jews. And an elder at our synagogue, Billy, like tells me about how he would take a chicken to the shochet every single week and he would, watch the process. And there was no there was no mystique in it. There was no you people knew what was happening. It was happening in a way that was respectful to the animal, but it was not concealed, it was not hidden away in complete other cities. And if your shochet was having a bad day. And there would be no waste because the shochet would probably not shecht an animal until they knew the needs of the community. And again, like there's so much waste involved in the secular and the kosher slaughter industry, in terms of how much can be used. And I feel really lucky to be able to learn with a teacher who preserves the halachot of Nikor, which involves purging the sciatic nerve from the back half of the animal, uh, which is not done in America really anymore, and certainly not in commercial slaughter industry like slaughter production, because it's really too time consuming. And you know, part of part of the thing that we're losing is the fact that this is supposed to be a time-consuming meditative process, and it is, supposed to take the involvement of everybody in the community. And that goes for being a scribe too. And I feel almost like being a shohet and being a scribe on our type of continuum. I'll probably feel less like that once I'm working in both of these crafts, but I don't know, you can interview me again, 5 years and see. But I'm really excited about the intercommunal possibilities of like what it means to bring these things back home because I think it gives them a real relevance to the religious lives of Jews that they've lost.
Well, I can definitely see that. I know that one of the back in the days when I was with Chabad, one of the things that provided a modicum of income for some of our the folks was the twice every 7 year inspection of your mezuzahs, and they would it was for a nominal fee. They'd come around and check, and that was an element of community in Chabad that I haven't seen reproduced anywhere else. In fact, the people that inspect our mezuzot right now are still Chabadniks. So, I mean, it would be really nice to be able to cultivate that kind of skill set right within our community. Uh, the other thing you mentioned about how personal slaughter used to be for us, our main Jewish community, it's interesting how many places have this same story. Some of our early schisms in our community in Bangor occurred over which community had the shochet, and it was we split off to another. I think there was a between Beth Israel and a congregation named Tiferet Israel that's no longer with us. Uh, Tiferet Israel, I think, took the shochet with them, and so it was,
Oh
and that
no.
yeah,
And that was the end.
and that means people don't eat. I know, growing up, of course, I didn't keep kosher like you. I was not raised Jewish. I was raised Methodist. Even though I was halakhically Jewish, it was one of those things. But even back then, we were well aware that, your meat came packaged at the store. You didn't go to a local butcher or shochet. You went to the supermarket, and it was glatt kosher right there at the store. And it's heavily depersonalized. And I wonder, do you think that there's any way possible for industrialized agriculture to be compatible with with the principles of being a shochet?
I gotta say, from my preliminary study, it's not looking good. Um, from what I understand is happening, it's just very disturbing. I believe that part of the mitzvah of shechita and part of the mitzvah of kashrut are to sensitize us to suffering in the world. So like if we have no relationship to the meat, what right do we have to eat it? It says if you desire meat, you will slaughter it. That's what the Pasuk in Devarim says. And everybody who's eating meat should be familiar with the halachot of meat and be familiar, where their meat comes from. And that goes for people who are Jewish and people who are not Jewish, whatever halachot looks like for them. If they have an ethical code, they should you know, try to follow it. But also part of this comes from it, that the burden of all of this really shouldn't be on the layperson. Communities should have agitated a little more for a different sort of model to meat production. And I'm not really sure what else could have happened from a historical perspective because, again, I'm new to learning all of this, but I know what's happening now is not great and could probably be solved by a handful of Shochet in every community. It's just not something that we do anymore. Because I mean, part of it is that we really want our Shochetim to be Haredim, and they have specific communal needs. And some of those specific communal needs involve not serving in live or living in the majority of Jewish communities that will be eating from their shechita. Um, which is like honestly kind of disturbing on its own. Like I think part of this is the relationship between the shohet and the kahal that they serve. And so that's also hard.
It is. We tend to err on the side of the frumus common denominator so often, and plus, I think the detachment from rural life, religious Jewish detachment, observant Jewish detachment from rural life, really augments this. I mean, we don't have pasture land, grazing land usually accessible to us in the communities where we live. I know that when I my old guard unit in Pennsylvania was really, really close to Mifflintown, which is one of the Empire Kosher's big slaughter plants. And it was a major thing for the Haredi or whoever was doing it. They definitely were very ultra Orthodox running the show there. Although I think the Star K guy may have been just modern Orthodox, the guy from Star K that would come through.
Well, that's why it's Star K.
Yeah, it was so it was always fascinating to me just how the same thing with you go to Naples, New York, and where they make the Manischewitz and package it. You have this little compound of Oompa Loompa rabbis that behind the fence that make the kosher wine or are involved in the kosher winemaking process.
And we
I,
assume that they know so much. We assume that they know so much, but like the reality of the matter is that because of the industrialization of the shechita process, every single person has a high specialization and has no idea what's happening at the other ends of the process. Um, or honestly, I've heard of a lot of cases of relying on a lot of leniencies to pay Gentiles to do the work. Like that happens in parchment production in Israel and the United States as well. What little
yeah,
that happens in the United States.
one of the reasons why I want the margin for error with Shechita in general. We've got our five or so forbidden techniques. Is the margin for error daunting to you as an aspiring shochet in any way, or is it just part of the game? It's just part of the reality of doing the business.
I think I have a different perspective on this than a lot of shochetim might have done. And part of that is that one of the things that Rav Shlomo does, who's the rabbi who's teaching us Shechita, is he lives in Israel, and because he is a non-Orthodox shohet, he cannot shecht behemot, large animals, in slaughterhouses. And I also don't think it's like legal to just be shechting in cities if you're not in slaughterhouses. So what he'll do is he'll go to Arab villages, and there's a process through which he collaborates with somebody who is Muslim, and the person who's Muslim says Bismillah, and Rosh Shlomo does the shecht, and by some opinions it can be considered halal. And if it's an avela, so much the better. That's if you've done it improperly, which happens a lot of times, or if it has treifot. There's still religious communities that it can be useful. And for my purposes, I think that there's a lot of people who would prefer hand slaughter to machine slaughter, even if it was a, a nevela as a non-kosher slaughter. There's a shortage of butchers in Maine, I'm pretty sure, and I'm hoping to work with small scale family farms that use heritage breeds and have free ranging happy animals, and I'm hoping that that will also be a draw to the average consumer because I am not really expecting that the six or so families that eat meat and keep kosher um, are going to pay my bills.
Oh, I almost wish I did. For my part, I became a pescatarian after the Postville agri products slaughter
Mr.
scandal with
Shoylam.
Aaron's Best in 2004, 2005.
That's on the curriculum.
Oh, good, good. I mean, it was because that's one of the things even if you do all of the slaughter correctly, it really is troubling to me the the labor abuses, all of the other things that go along. If the whole point of kashrus is to elevate the mundane act of slaughter and eating to something that approaches holiness, then all of the conduct surrounding that process feels like it should reflect our values. And that's one of the things is as long as I would almost feel better about eating meat from somebody that was committed to like the principles of free range. Even if they stunned the animal, I would be more interested in eating that than what I have seen come out of uh, Latin America as far as our slaughter goes, or
The
what used to take place
classic
in I.
Shtisel Haredi guy, the slaughterhouse,
Yeah.
having affairs in South America. Yeah, I mean, it's horrific. I mean, it's the labor abuses. There are huge halakhic violations actually that is happening that nobody wants to talk about either. They're not checking the knives properly, and I mean, like that should blow the mind of anybody who's even like a little familiar with the holocaust of this whole situation. It's they're relying on a crazy amount of leniencies for people who are putting eight Hamish hectares on it and charging like $25 a pound for a chicken that is like underweight, not a heritage breed, and has been in a cage its whole life. And it's just concerning. And I'm just not convinced that at the scale that they're shucking at, that they're not like large amounts of halakhot being violated that people are just not catching. There's just no way. An average shochet in a slaughterhouse might shuck 3,000 chickens in one day. And you shouldn't be as a showhead emotionally. I don't think you should be shechting more animals than like you and your friends can process. And like there's an extent to which machinery is useful to relieve wear and tear on the bodies of people who do need to prepare this meat for, the people who need to eat it. But like it's clear that it's gone too far, and we've been reading lots of actually Temple Grandin's reviews about these slaughterhouses and her opinions about it, and I'm obsessed with her. I think she's so amazing, and like I want to email her and be like, "What do you think of what we're doing?" You know?
Yeah,
Um,
and she's been a surprising advocate for appropriately done slaughter for a long time. I remember she was suggesting agri products move to the Weinberg pen. Uh, I I don't know if that is if the Weinberg pen. For my part, I've never really been that interested in kosher slaughter, so I didn't know if that really was uh, treated as them being standing and uh, uh, yeah, I cannot talk tonight. The standing slaughter or laying on its back. I didn't know if that qualified as either of those, but I know that she recommended that as a solution, and it sounded like the OU said it was a good thing. Uh, are you also training as part of this to also inspect? So would you be a shochet ubodech, or is that
yeah, there's the knife inspection goes with the Kabbalah for the shechita. It used to be that the Chacham of the city would inspect your knife, but I don't know. You've met a rabbi. He's not really a knife guy. He's more of a book guy. I don't really think he'd want to do it.
right?
So yeah, it's 1 year certification for Ofot, and it's one year certification for Behemoth and the Trefot for Behemoth. But at the end of the year for the Ofot, I should be able to inspect the knives and check the kashrut of like most fowl, except for small fowl, which is a separate examination because of the delicacy of their legs.
And then post slaughter, are you also going to be training to do the inspections of the lungs, any other
Yeah,
disqualifying
yeah.
signs?
Inspecting, that's part of the second year. We learn how to inspect the lungs, and we learn how to reference and look up the 70 different trephot, and we memorize the more common ones. And I do believe we will be learning Nikor, which is is purging the sciatic nerve, which is much rarer. And even though it is a 2-year program, people have been in the second year of the program for some time now because of the intensity and of the inspection of the lungs of Behemoth. And it's you have to have 3 consecutive kosher shechts in order to have a chazaka, an assumption of kashrut, and to receive your Kabbalah for those animals. And with larger animals, that's harder.
Uh, do you know now if are you going to go by the Ramaz stringencies, or are you going to go by
Well, first of
Sephardic?
all, that wouldn't work because the Ramah forbids women from slaughtering.
Well, yeah. So it's moot then, I guess. That's good. But That's cool. I mean, this is really exciting. What do you see a place for this? Obviously the observant set, the all. We should, I guess, we should be careful about using observant. I would say you and I are observant
We
people, but
have a pretty fluid community in Maine, and I'm pretty hopeful about
I,
outside of, some regulated Orthodox branches, like the lay people, I think it could find some traction.
I would hope so. It would really be a great way to both connect uh, locally produced food with locally produced uh, ritual talent. So I think it would be really, and we have a halal uh, butcher or some kind of slaughter shop opening up in Waldo County. I think it's Waldo County near
I'm
Unity
interested
this
in
year.
that, but I don't know how they feel about Jewish feminists.
They seem very pleasant. It might be worth building the bridges. It could be an exciting thing for both our faiths locally if we could
Hmm.
coordinate. What's fascinating to me is any meat foods that I got in the army were both kosher and halal, uh, because of course they can most of their practices that they can rely on kosher slaughter as being compatible with halal. Obviously, we can't use halal, but they, I don't know. Maybe there's some opportunity there to burn that bridge down a little bit, and not burn the bridge down, burn that wall down.
Absolutely.
So with your I guess it sounds like it's a 2-year program or
Yeah, for the shechita.
awesome. And do you get any kind of cool certificate at the end or
Yeah, we have a Kabbalah paper that's signed by Rav Shlomo and I think like 4 or 5 other rabbis to certify that we are Shochet Ubodek and we're certified in Ofot, Ubehamot, and checking for Treifot and Nikor.
and do you have any sense of what kind of do you anticipate doing lambs, any particular animals that you would want to work with here in Maine, given the makeup of our livestock?
I think I think lamb is probably pretty reliable given the sheep population here. I'm
We
not
used
really
to have a
sure.
we used to have a congregant in Appleton that had was raising sheep, so it would have been, and I know he was very interested in doing, uh, but at the time, we don't have anybody that's trained shochet in our community until
Well,
now.
and then
So,
also, if he has the right sheep, then there's the whole shofar situation. And the only reason I'm not making shofars also is because I just don't know any sheep people.
well, maybe we can connect you if they still have their farm. Uh, but
That would, yeah.
fantastic. Yeah. So, do you imagine more poultry than uh, bigger animals or?
Poultry is much less of a financial and time and labor investment. Large animals, there is another person who is training to be a shochet in Maine. And I think with larger animals, that is going to be something we have to collaborate on it just because of the labor of it and the uncertainty and no nobody really wants to shecht alone. I don't think, God forbid, right? Um so I'm hoping when it comes to getting certified for larger animals that I can have more conversations with this fellow student in my program and with local farmers about what is both economical and what is sustainable in terms of what people are eating and what people need to cull from their herds and their cattle.
And I think this is something that I would love to advertise here on this podcast, but also through our congregation. Uh, I one of the stumbling blocks for me is I'm not a vegan. Obviously, I love eggs. I love fish. I eat a lot of cheese. And one of the holdups for me in getting free range chickens on my own property here has been, the reality that at some point you have to cull the your flock, and knowing that there would be somebody that, either for whatever reason may have an interest in killing my chickens, that would be fantastic. More of us could do that kind of thing if there was a resource in our community that could turn that into viable meat products.
The average farmer is actually very interested in a humane death for their animals because that is what part of humane and correct care for farm animals looks like because they do not understand sickness and suffering. And so like there was a unit on like if you know an animal is going to like die, can you kill it? And if it's suffering, then absolutely, absolutely. And it's it would be ideal to have, aging chickens all be available for me. And but the reality is that that's not always the case. And again, a quick and humane death is a form of showing kavo to the animal and being a responsible steward of their life.
Well, it's a real opportunity to educate our community about Sahar Bale Chaim, and which for us is the suffering of living creatures, and it's a very fundamental principle of Jewish law. And I think that, not just this, the practical implications of this, but there's also a teaching opportunity for the Maine Jewish community, and having you as a resource in the state, and whoever the other member of your cohort is from the state, it's a great way to promote the values and to a wider audience than just ourselves even. So
That's the
good
hope.
stuff. So with the becoming a Soferet, uh, what's your program like for that?
That is more of a personal apprenticeship model. I learned how to process parchment actually before I learned how to do um, any soft fruit like beyond that. And I went to a queer parchment retreat and I learned how to make parchment from Yonatan Reches and Rabbi Linda Motzkin. And that was really excellent. And then one of the wonderful things that Yonatan Reches does is that he is the founder of the nonprofit, the Kedusha Project, which aims to use roadkill and Kedusha. Using non-shechted hides in Kedusha is totally fine and is actually completely the norm. I think there's a common misconception that it all has to be from a correctly shechted animal, but no. And roadkill is just the same as, you know, byproducts of the secular slaughter industry, which is what they're currently using in Israel for mass large-scale parchment production. Um, and so, I was really excited and I was really about this opportunity. And so I went to visit him and I learned how to skin a deer and how to process roadkill, which was a really meaningful experience. A lot of people in America, because of food insecurity or because of traditional practices or because they just don't believe in waste, eat roadkill. And that's like a very real thing. And there's areas of the United States right now where there are advisories not to do so because of PFAS contamination, which
Maine
is
being one of those places
Maine
often.
being one of those places, north south of where we live. I think north might be okay. But it was a really meaningful experience. And Jonathan is a vegetarian and his partner is a vegan, and that's why they do that. But learning, I had always wanted to be a scribe, and the lessons. I have I have a lot of ADHD and I have a lot of trouble focusing and the lessons, the cost for how long they were, it just doesn't work for my learning style. And there's a lot of wonderful teachers online, but I don't want to waste their time. And Yonatan was very generous and I started learning the halachot of scribing from him and then I purchased a guidebook from Jen Taylor Friedman on making mezuzot, and I've been learning out of that. And I'm working on my first mezuzah right now. But over the summer, when I visited Yonatan, I learned how to check mezuzot. I learned how to form the letters. I learned how to check and repair tefillin. I learned how to check and repair Torah scrolls. And a lot of those more practical skills are they involve really intensive halachot, but that's I think a little that's easier acquired than calligraphy skills. Calligraphy skills is like a thing you have to drill like every day for a very, very long time, which I've done, and it's still very difficult. And part of the reason that it's very difficult is that I cut my own quills, I make my own ink. I use parchment that Yonatan made, and none of these things are mass processed. And so I have lots and lots of variables in terms of my learning that Haredi scribes and even other egal scribes actually just don't have because they're purchasing their ink from non-egalitarian saffroot places. I mean, I hope some of them are making their own ink, but you know, it's a messy process. Most people live in an apartment. I don't want to make any assumptions. And I know that most people are not, in fact, processing their own parchment or their own gid or their own ritsuot. And I really try when I can to resource all of those things from my Kedusha guide, the Kedusha project, which I'm honored to also be on the board of now. And that I think makes the learning process slower, but I'm okay with that because I do think that it is infinitely more valuable to do it this way. And I really wouldn't have it any other way.
Maybe we could start working with the Sportsmen's Association of Maine to to get your hands on some ruminants here in the state, and because it's not like we don't have deer. I think it would be fantastic to have a moose mezuzah, but that's just
Yeah, I
me.
mean, if the ethics that Yonatan has in terms of processing these hides has changed. He sought out as a vegetarian to start processing roadkill, and at some point he started because if you want to learn, right, how to process hides into parchment and you're a gay man, you have to ask not Jewish people, right? And those not Jewish people who are processing the leather are usually processing it because they go out into the woods and they shoot, kill it, and eat it. And so his learning how to do this and interacting with these people gave him a really newfound understanding for like what it means to hunt your own meat and what it means for the meat to live entirely like the animal to live entirely wild lives before they pass away and for every part of the animal to be used. But the only part of the animal that's not typically used, unfortunately, is the hide, which we do have a use for. And in to me and to other members of our collective who have similar vegetarian ethics, um, the hides of lovingly hunted animals from families who are subsistence hunting, which is the case for a lot of hunters in the areas where we source our hides from. That's still ethically better, and it feels like a better chidor for this mitzvah, a better beautification than buying parchment from the mass, parchment industry that comes out of the Haredi community in Israel, because the provenance of that parchment does not come from um, such a thoughtful process.
That's And it's so exciting. I mean, for our listeners that don't know the history of scribes, one of the things you're not just basically a human Xerox. You're also meticulously copying and preserving our written texts, both on our mezuzot and our tefillin, on our Torah scrolls. Uh, it's a generational process. It's what's kept us alive. But you also have to be experts in our laws, and not just you can't just be an enhanced calligrapher. Uh, and because of that, in both these fields, they're both very chauvinistic fields. Uh, they're either centered now in Israel in the case of being a you know in the case of being a scribe, but if you're doing slaughter, it's not you said you pointed out what the if the Rima was involved, you wouldn't be doing it. Um, what do you are you running into sexism in the field, and do you find sexism in the response to from Jews that find out you're doing these things?
Yeah, I could talk about sexism all day because I am a women and gender studies major in my secular life. The short answer, yes, like absolutely. So many people have so many deeply misogynistic ideas about what it means to be a religious Jew and what it means to be a Jewish woman and what it means to be like a modern non-Orthodox Jew. I think my commitment to observance, like and like Shabbat observance in pursuing these things as well, like makes people uncomfortable because that's the religious intensity of Shabbat observance, not mine, but like a lot of people's in particulars, is associated with a branch of Judaism that does not really uplift women to be scholars, and um, it's really difficult for people to imagine that in a non-Orthodox context, you could have sat down and read all those laws and understood them and known the right questions to ask because these are such foreign concepts to so many people, and it does take so much work. Um, And I'm not sure how much of that is a function of like Jewish sexism, and I'm not sure how much of that is a function of Jewish insecurity with observance. Like they do kind of dovetail in a weird way in my case. Um, and especially because there's in terms of the Soferet, there's not really a certification at this time for non-Orthodox scribes. At some point you just end up being good enough and writing it, pretty enough. And um most people study with Jen Taylor Friedman, and the the mileage on like female scribes in terms of what jobs they get is very much connected to the beauty of their handwriting, which is to say most of the non-Orthodox egalitarian scribes who I'm aware of their work, they do have great handwriting and they are great scholars of halakha, but they are not being hired for the halakhic part. And people do want to treat you as a glorified calligrapher or as like a funky housewife who's like really into keeping kosher and you're like, grassroots and crunchy, but like the fact that you take it religiously seriously and the fact that um the fact that you're reading all those books like that's a lot for people.
I would,
Expecting like there's an age thing. Like how am I supposed to trust you with the most sacred things that we have? And I don't know if we can't trust each other, what are we supposed to do here?
oh, we're kind of supposed to trust each other. I have worried. Most of the, yeah, it's like you say, most of the women that I know that have these skills end up just making artisanal ketubot, and and that's lovely, and it's an important thing, but it's certainly not. It's not where you'd expect us to be pushing things, and that's the pain point of egalitarian Judaism, and you touched on it. Uh, we can be wonderfully egalitarian, but our commitment tradition generally is only in orbit around the the liturgical component, what we do at services. And once you leave that place, there's seldom any interest in being shomer mitzvot in any way. And conservative Judaism in particular, which is, that is our host community, is on paper really good about observance, or really demands observance, but we don't demand it of ourselves. And so I do wonder. The other component of that is, from the Mishnah, find yourself a teacher, acquire for yourself a friend. That must be much more difficult from a gendered basis. Because finding yourself a teacher means you have to find somebody willing to teach. And it sounds like you found teachers,
I was so
but
lucky. I think I'm very much the first generation of Jewish people in history who had really not that much trouble finding out how to do this.
that is amazing. There was a time where I interned briefly at Empire Kosher just to try and learn it, and I was so turned off. But I don't know, part of it was, the military experience for me made it very difficult. I find I'm not squeamish by any stretch of the imagination, but I did find slaughter to be, from a military perspective, triggering. So, a mental health perspective, very triggering. So, more power to anybody that can do that. But I also don't have very steady hands, so I could never be a scribe. And envy those that I don't envy. I'm just really glad to know people that can do it.
You can
Uh,
always process parchment. You can always skin a deer.
and I can. I have skinned uh, many deer and at least one moose in my life. So
Let's
it's
go.
yeah, it's that doesn't bother me actually. The slaughter part does, but the dressing a deer doesn't. Hmm.
And people have different comforts and different skills, and that's why much of this is a communal process.
So I guess the next question is, where would you like to be with this in, one of those, where do you want to be with this in 5 years? And you've already touched on so much of this, but what place do you see these skills having in the community? And then what's next for you? Or do you have anything left to learn that it's Judaism. There's always something more to learn, but
Of
do you have
course.
any other skills you want to cultivate after these two?
I have a large list. People are always joking, well, are you going to be a Moyle? If they let me, sure. Uh, there's there's a lot of underserved communities in a lot of these places. There's a lot of places Orthodox Jews will not go. Um, I hope to travel. My family is Cuban. Cuba has no Orthodox Jews. It also has no rabbis, no moralim, no shochetim, and still has a whole bunch of Jews who read the Megillah on Purim. And I'd like to go and see it, and I'd like to learn the provenance of this Megillah, and I'd like to record all of these things, and I'd also like to provide meat for these communities. So that's something I'd really like to do. I'm hoping to have other people to do this work with me locally. I'm hoping to have, because there's like a lot of this process requires specialized halakhic knowledge, but the beauty of this is that if there's one or two people who do have that halakhic knowledge, there's a lot that we can delegate to people. If they're comfortable with the things that they're, being delegated to, and there should be a lot of negotiation around, labor because labor is valuable and people deserve to be compensated for their work. But that being said, I'm hoping, to have a community of people doing this, and I'm hoping to be able to feed people. I'm hoping there's, you know, one or two more people who have a better relationship with food and with kashrut because of the work that I'm doing. I'm hoping more people put up mezuzot. I'm hoping that I get more people to fill in. I'm hoping to write a Megillah. I'm hoping to write a Torah scroll. I don't think the Torah scroll is going to happen in the next 5 years, but never say never.
It's it'd be a serious mitzvah that one that I don't. I mean,
It would
we
be a
all
jacked looking Torah scroll. It would look scary.
well, one of the things about Torah scrolls that I've observed in a lot of liberal Jewish communities is that they suffer from benign neglect, uh,
Yeah.
and we love them and we love them to death, and we don't. And this is part of the problem, of course, is that the only reliable authorities for us are Orthodox ones, and at least that's the impression. And to me, it
Yeah.
would be really fantastic if I said, well, I've got this inventory of 8 or 9 Torahs here at Congregation Beth Israel. We know that a couple of them are not usable as our daily driver. It would be fantastic to be able to rehabilitate them. It would be fantastic to go to a local resource to keep and not saying we'd expect it for free. I mean, this is the kind of thing where I think, you should be fairly compensated for it. But it used to be that we could do that in many of our communities. And now you find yourself shipping, in Maine, the story has always been to ship it down to Brookline, and there was always a Soferet there that could do it. These days, it's more and more turning to ship it to Israel and have it repaired and then sent back. So it would be really nice to have these local resources, and it's a real education opportunity, and as you say, it's a really nice way to build connectedness in our community. What can we do to help you do this more locally? Do we tell people to come to Willow to check their mezuzot every twice every 7 years, or do you have a different cadence you'd like to inspect people's mezuzot for?
Uh, Happy to inspect people's mezuzot, whatever their minhag requires. Uh, the worst part about inspecting the mezuzot is like the reality is that a lot of people just it's not like you have to check if a kosher scroll is kosher. It's like you take it out and then they turn to you because they don't understand it's supposed to be written on parchment. They're like, "Hey, is this kosher?" And it's printed out. So that's hard. I would like to check people's moves out, but I would also like to do like scribal programming and talking to congregations about what it means to produce Kedusha and like what are some great stories around scribing and how to cut a quill and how to write your name in Hebrew letters and what is parchment production. Um, I know Yonatan has a spinning geed workshop, and geed is what you use to sew Torah scrolls together. And it's always needed for repair, and congregations typically really like to do that. I would also like congregations to take a vested heshbon nefesh at their community and really think to themselves, have we been stewards of these Torah scrolls the way that we should be, and what can we do to return them to their most ideal working condition or retire them appropriately, and like understand that it to work with egalitarian scribes is is a big step, absolutely. And our methods and our work will not look like Haredim, and that's a good and important thing. So it's important to lift up our expertise and our knowledge when you see it, and to open opportunities and communities for education and for service, and to encourage people to have passionate relationships to these mitzvot that make them want to be better stewards of their kedusha and make them want to know about the process. It's sad when tefillin are, cheap things you buy, you put on once, you throw in a box. A pair of used to film can tell a story of your family and where you've been and where everyone has been. You can tell so much about the script and about the way that the parchment is wrapped and about like, which sides of the Ritsuit are blackened. And I mean, the script, again, the script. It's it's such a beautiful thing, and there's so many details. And even if you don't care about it to that like minutia level, giving these mitzvot space and not relegating them to Haredim, and reclaiming them, saying, yeah, the Torah is still ours, the Tefillin is still ours, and mezuzot are still ours, and Megillah is still ours, and these are things that we care about and that we value. And it does matter if they're in working condition, and it does matter if we have, educated and qualified scribes. And to take a chance on egalitarian scribes, and it really shouldn't be that much of a chance because we don't really I don't understand how liberal congregations aren't worried about a time where Haredim refused to work with us. And I also wonder why they think they're getting these people's best work.
Yeah, are they? That's I don't know that it's even true that we're getting their best work, and it's nothing against them. It's in a lot of cases, it's how would we even know if we're not cultivating the ability to identify it among ourselves? And I think that there's a lot to be said for. I don't think the mission of liberal Judaism was ever to hit the eject button on Jewish competency, and that's one of the things that I think it's so very important for us to reclaim just across the board, whether it's scroll work, it also applies to our Chevra Kadishas. Uh, these are all things that we are kind of surrendering that domain knowledge, even though it's still accessible to us. So I think it's very important what you're doing, and I can vouch. I have this very precious set of tefillin. In fact, I'm surprised when you were looking at them for me the other day that sand gets in everything and it never comes out. And I just feel like every time I've opened my tefillin case for the last decade, I still have desert sands from places I've deployed that pour out. The stories the I won't remember anything else that I took with me in these places, but I will remember that I had a set of tefillin that were precious to me, and that I laid tefillin in a former dictator's palace, or that I davened davened on a mountaintop in Alaska. These things, these things are our connective tissue to our physical connective tissue to our practices and our traditions, and where we've been. And I think it's so beautiful that you're undertaking this. Uh, and if there's anything we can do to promote that, we certainly will. I'd love to have you back for this. If I'm still doing this podcast after rabbinical school, I'd love to have you back with to explore how things are going
The
with your
progress update. Hopefully there will be progress.
yeah. It's so we have an embarrassment of riches in Maine, and you are now part of that collective, and grateful you're here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Have a great night.
Thanks.